They swatted him. They condemned him on social media. They did everything they could to silence him. It didn't work.
Your show's a big hit. It's a big success. You do fantastically. Your ratings are great, and we're very proud of you.
This is Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags.
Massive changes at the southern border, obviously, since President Trump came in and President Biden left. Whoever was running the Biden administration wasn't him, it turns out, if you read Jake Tapper's book, which I'm not going to. But Ali Bradley is the Southwest reporter from NewsNation, also a great friend of ours, has been on that border for a very long time, and for my money, knows more than anybody else about what's going on down there. Ali, I noticed you're by the wall. How are you?
You got me out in the elements today, Pags. Doing good, doing good. It's not 110 degrees today in Del Rio, so, little victories. We can be outside and not die. So, hey, we're here for it.
You've shown my audience and me that shot, different variances of that shot for many years now. I'm wondering, is there any change whatsoever in the actual structure yet or not?
Yeah, so the one that you're looking at behind me, as you can see, is like very piecemealed, right? You have a black iron fence back there. That one was actually put up by the Bush administration. You can see the chicken wire here that is connecting the Bush fence to what I'm sitting in front of, which is the Trump wall. The Bush fence was essentially pushed back, and that chicken wire is what is now connecting the Bush wall to the Trump wall because they haven't finished it. So with that being said, there are conversations being had. Congressman Tony Gonzalez and the like, they have been down here advocating for wall structure in Del Rio. This is where I'm sitting, is just at the end of where the international boundary is, where there were actually 16,000 migrants from Haiti underneath the bridge over there. So you could almost hit it with a rock. So that's where we are right now. But when you go up to the Vega, which is where we saw hundreds of people streaming across the Rio Grande for years, that area, Governor Greg Abbott is building a wall up there. So that wall has almost been built all the way. It's really weird, too, because that neighborhood up there, Pags, it's walled in. So you've got the river as your kind of backyard, if you will.
Right.
And then you have like a fence as your front yard, or you have a Trump wall. You have some kind of barrier. Some of these houses, you actually have to go through a gate to get to your house. And then you quite literally have two fences fencing you in your nice riverfront property, right? That's the reality.
It's crazy.
Down there. It's absolutely crazy to see. We've done stories on it, but Governor Abbott continues to build that wall despite calling for $11 billion in reimbursement, not getting any of it yet. So in the reconciliation bill, we know there are $12 billion set aside, earmarked for Texas reimbursement, but they haven't gotten it, right? So Texas has essentially been kind of holding the line, but are they going to be holding the bag? We'll see, Pags, if that actually shakes out. Tony Gonzalez had said, hey, if we're not getting money to reimburse Texas, I'm not voting for the bill, and others should do the same, kind of sit on their hands because they want that funding, right? And so we'll see if it comes to fruition, but it's weird because even though that funding isn't being promised, he continues to build the wall. I don't know if his constituents are on board, if Texans want Texan taxpayer dollars to continue to be spent, because that's exactly what it is.
Right.
When the Trump administration's now in place, right? They're building this wall. And again, there's no promise of that money coming back. And again, I mean, the reality is, regardless of where you sit on the aisle, why should it be, right? The governor chose upon himself to take on a federal problem on a state level and spend Texas taxpayer dollars, right? So that was a decision.
Right.
And then he was reelected, right? So his constituents wanted him in that space. But again, there was no promise of reimbursement under Biden. It was just kind of this hope. And you can hope in one hand and, crap in the other and see which one fills up faster. So we'll see what comes out.
I was hoping you would make that analogy. It is, it's Ali Bradley right from the border. Ali, can you do me a favor? Oh, by the way, as a Texas resident, I would like to see us get reimbursed because we are literally protecting the entire nation by putting up this wall that Biden wouldn't do. But I get your point is very well taken. He did this without any promise of reimbursement. We'll see what happens. But if you don't mind, let's get as remedial as we can. The border between the United States and Mexico, especially in Texas, is outlined, is shown by the Rio Grande. So at the Rio Grande sections where the river does make the separation, is the border literally right in the middle of the river? Like if you cross the middle of the river, you're in a different country?
Yeah, so that's like a navigable waterway kind of provision, if you will, once they cross that middle section of the river. And that's why Governor Greg Abbott was able to put those buoys in the navigable waterway as long as they were on kind of the north side of that river. So the Mexico side, the south side of that border, the river is quite literally the middle ground. So once they cross that area, that becomes the responsibility of the United States, right? And so that's when we see them coming face to face with this razor wire, and people are mad that they're cutting the razor wire. And it's like, hold
Right.
on, do you know Border Patrol's job is quite literally to apprehend people who cross the border illegally and don't have documentation? So they either cut the wire and they meet them where they are, or that person traverses through the wire, gets cut up. Now Border Patrol has to send an agent to the hospital to babysit that person because they were hurt. Or that person walks to the end of the razor wire because, hey, Biden said that they sold all their homes and everything to get here, so they don't have a home to go back to. So they're walking to the end of the razor wire and they become a gotaway. Like, those are the issues that they were up against here and chastised over, essentially. But again, people didn't realize the wall, this is not the border. The border is probably a mile past that way.
I was just going to
the
ask you that because,
vegetation. I mean, it's far away. If you look at the
right.
map, I think it's more than a half a mile as the crow flies to the river.
So I want people to see where you are. I'm going to take you full again, and I appreciate you explaining the river because I knew that that's where the international border was. But you're nowhere near the border now, although the wall is right there. So we've literally built the wall a half a mile to a mile inland.
You know, I love a show and tell. So
I
I'm gonna
love
walk
this.
you over here
Show
and
us.
show you what's going on. Okay, so these are the walls. Like, this is where I was just sitting. That's the Trump wall.
Yes.
We're walking now to the Bush wall, the iron fence. I'm gonna show you how this is held up, you guys, because it's literally held up by rebar. And you can see how it's wavy. Can you see the waves in the wall pads?
Yes.
Like, it is that unstable right here at the wall. So you can see it's literally held up by this rebar. And you can see how it's wavy right there. So you can see all this vegetation back here. There's a kind of a barrier, a roadway right here that Border Patrol drives along.
Yes.
Let me walk over here and maybe we can see down the pipe.
And that shrubbery is still the United States, right?
That is still the United States. This wall is not the barrier. Like, this is not what makes the U.S. versus Mexico. My hand is not in Mexico right now. That is not what's happening. We have about a half a mile to get to the river. So the river is the actual boundary. Okay, perfect. So you can kind of see. So you can see down, let me see. Can you see down the roadway a little bit? You can see how far that road goes.
Yes.
That road goes pretty far down there as well. So that's a half a mile that those individuals, that people have to walk down in order to get to this area. So they do want the wall built, but here's the reality. They're like, it's not that necessary because people aren't crossing by the hundreds right here. This isn't a highly trafficked area, and that's where they're prioritizing the wall structure to be built. Because by the time an individual gets to this wall, Border Patrol has seen them probably 17 times, Pags. They have seen them on several cameras. They have had, definite indications that that individual is here crossing into the United States illegally by the time they hit this wall. So they need the wall structure because it slows people down getting into the communities. Like, this is how close we are to some industrial stuff, which is really easy for them to disappear into and hide. They use these areas, they use these trucking areas, and they will hide behind Connex boxes, whatever it might be, and utilize those spaces to evade law enforcement. But again, the reality is there's a lot of technology behind these fences that law enforcement are seeing before they even get to where I'm standing. And so the structure is not prioritized here in Del Rio because they're getting between like 19 and 50 encounters a day.
Why is that fence behind you so wonky? Why is that so wonky? It's like the wall, then there's some, you said, really chicken wire, and then there are a couple of posts or something beyond that. Is that a little George W. Bush, a little Obama, a little Trump? What's going on there?
Okay, so the wall itself had integrity and structurally would have been fine had it not been moved. So the sheriff here, who is a Democrat, he has been advocating for the wall to be finished since I met him in 2021. Literally met him before the Haitian crisis in September of 2021. I met him a month prior, and he brought me to this exact spot we're sitting at. And he was ticked off because he was like, this is not safe. It's held up by, a gust of wind could essentially take it down. And the rebar wasn't even up yet, Pags. That's how unsettled and unstable this was. This wall was held up by slanted rebar, was not even cemented in yet. And so he was mad because he was like, this is not only a safety hazard, but it's a national security risk for everyone involved. And he said, politics aside, this is not politics for people who live at the border. He said, if we build a wall, it protects our community, and in turn it protects the nation. So he wanted that wall structure built. So the black wonky fence was a structure right here, sitting right where I'm at. Let me show you the concrete kind of
Okay,
ground
right,
here.
right, right.
This is where it was poured in, and literally what they did is they moved it, 500 yards back to
Why?
make room for the Trump wall, to make room for this. And
Come
then
on.
they abandoned this construction, and so you got chicken wire bags. That's
It is.
literally what happened. It was the best laid plans. They said, hey, let's move this back so there's kind of a structure, but we're going to build this big, beautiful wall, and that other structure won't even matter. And holy cow, here we are 4 years later with chicken wire
That's crazy.
because they abandoned this wall. And down there, you can see stacks on stacks of taxpayer paid for wall materials collecting dust sitting down there. So it's a pretty wild juxtaposition to see this and to see it still abandoned, like where
Yeah.
it's at, where it's just right here where I'm sitting. That's where it ends.
That's crazy.
Right.
It is
So,
Allie
yeah.
Bradley, Southwest reporter, NewsNation, our great friend, and showing us the wall, the structure. That's the most politicized area of wall, I'm guessing, and the entirety
Yeah.
of the wall. Let me ask you this. How did the 16,000 Haitians get there? They've got to come across the river. They've got to then go between a half a mile and a mile to get to the area near where you are. How do they all end up being staged underneath the bridge? Did
Yeah, so
the DHS under Mayorkas allow that? Did they say, come on over? What happened?
pretty much, it was a really, really interesting situation that played out. They were crossing a weir dam, which is like a foot dam. So it was, they could touch all the way across. And they were crossing into Del Rio directly. They were not where I'm sitting. It's just down the way. So that weir dam brings them right to the bank, right? And underneath that bridge is where they all kind of congregated because that's where that dam literally guided them to. And
Okay.
so you would have groups of people, say 100 crossed. Well, Border Patrol doesn't have the capabilities to move 100 people that quickly. They didn't have any indication, which I don't know how that happened because we can literally see people crossing in the Darien Gap and have a trajectory coming to the US. So I do not know how they missed 16,000 people
Right.
in, coming towards the United States.
Right.
Which also brings up the question of why allow that spigot to stay open. When we saw that, the sheriff literally called me and he was like, I got 4,000 people under my bridge. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Call me back a couple hours, 6,000 people under my bridge. I'm like, what?
Wow.
So like they saw it happening, right? And didn't shut it down. Instead, the Haitian community literally built up their own kind of homesteads. They had tents, they had commerce, they were going back and forth, selling things, buying things from Mexico, buying food. They actually had thrown the food from Rudy's that was provided to them on the ground. This didn't really make any national headlines until the horse whipping allegations came to play, but it was
Right.
really continuing for over about a week. And these individuals, it was kind of this conversation, Pags, of if they were in federal custody or not, if they were just kind of there waiting. And we saw that happen in Lukeville, Arizona as well, when there were 800 single adult men from Africa behind me. They weren't processed, they weren't transported yet, so they weren't arguably in custody of the federal government. So that's how those individuals were kind of materializing under that bridge, but weren't in federal custody yet. And it was kind of one of those things that they were using loopholes and playing with to maneuver because it was something they had never seen before. I
Well,
mean, what do
Allie,
you do
I've got
with
to ask you this: how
16,000
did
people?
they remove them like overnight? All of a sudden, they were all gone.
Yeah.
Now, I live in the San Antonio area. I know many of them ended up here, but how did they do that? It was almost like one night they're there, the next night everybody's gone, no problem, nothing
Yeah.
to see here.
And that was essentially when Al Sharpton got the word that this was going on. He came down here when there were still around 2,000 people under the bridge. It was really interesting because while this was going on, and sorry, we're talking about something old, Pags, but I feel like people don't know a lot of this.
People don't know
While
the
this was
context
going
at
on-
all. People saw it,
No.
then it was gone, and we just stopped talking about it.
Yeah. And I was actually tracking how fast they were moving moving people out from underneath the bridge.
Wow.
And they were only moving between 200 and 300 people an hour. It was very slow going. They were moving them via bus and things like that to the airports and to the NGO. There's an NGO here that popped up in 2019 to help out because you remember a migrant caravan crashed into the southern border
Yes.
under the end of Trump's administration. And so essentially this NGO was helping out. But what was really interesting, Pat, is once Biden, the conversations were being had that the Biden administration, people would be coming down. And once Al Sharpton had put boots on the ground down here, I'm not even kidding you. They moved 2,000 people out of here within an hour or so. I mean, quick, gone. They were out of here. They only repatriated, I believe, 4,000 Haitians out of the 16,000 back
Oh,
to
wow.
Haiti because Haiti was not, Port-au-Prince had a bunch of issues and they were not accepting these repatriation flights. And then there was violence. They were trying to take over the planes. Like all of this stuff was going on. And it was a really volatile situation, and one that I didn't understand, and one that essentially catapulted me into all this coverage because the sheriff told me back then. I was embedded with the sheriff. I was independent at the time. Media was not allowed down there. The only person down there was Fox News. And I had worked my way in with the sheriff, and so he had embedded me under
Great
the
job.
bridge in his truck every day. Now the issue is that he told me, he said, "Listen, we don't know what happens with the kids." I said, "What are you talking about?" So we have no count on them. We have no idea. They cross over by themselves and they're poof, gone. They go to a different agency. They go to ORR. At the time, I had no idea what he was talking about. I just heard about child trafficking. So I ended up down in a caravan in Tapachula with 6,000 people for 2 weeks because I wanted to see how these kids were handled, if these kids were in fact being trafficked. And what's really sad is our open border policies, what we saw over the last 4 years, that we saw 11 million people show up at our southern border. 520,000 unaccompanied children showed up as well. That's more than the 6 years combined prior to the Biden administration.
Well, Allie,
And
how are they handled? They would show up at the border. And by the way, it's Allie Bradley. Go to Allie Bradley TV on all the socials. Go follow her right now. You're dumb if you don't. ALI Bradley TV. Go make it happen. We've heard about 300,000. You're now saying 500,000. What was the process? These kids would show up unaccompanied with a phone number, with an address. And I think you told me that some of these addresses had 100 people were going to the same address, something like that. What was the actual
yeah, that was
process? If
an
you're
OIG
underage and you
report.
show up, what happens?
Yeah, so an OIG report found that these kids were sent to, one home had 100 kids or whatever that might be. But when a child crosses over unaccompanied, that's any child that doesn't have a parent or guardian or a sponsor that is a legal sponsor for them under the age of 17. Now, there's a lot of nuances here because we found out that the vast majority, 61% of the 520,000 children that entered under the Biden administration were young men, ages 14 to 17.
Oh,
So we talked with former HSI people who said, you know what, the cartel sends kids over here all the time because they start training at 10 to 12 years old on how to use an AR, and they come across the border unaccompanied, and that's what they are. They get released into the country. They get released to Health and Human Services, which has a branch called the Office of Refugee Resettlement. So Robert F. Kennedy is right now tasked with dealing with these unaccompanied children. I bring up those two numbers. 520,000 is how many entered under Biden. 320,000 are currently unaccounted for, which means they tried to reach out to them, tried to call them. They either didn't have a court date at all or they weren't reachable. When HHS, which is the agency that deals with these children, actually reached out to call. So how did they get to the southern border in the first place? The narrative has always been the parents are sending them over and the parents are staying behind so that the kid can maybe have a better life in America.
right.
That is not what we learned based on conversations with agents and based on conversations with Homeland Security investigators who oftentimes deal with these families and these kids. And they said that what will happen is a mother will come up to the border, say she has 3 children with her, and say the cartel says, okay, it's $5,000 a head, because everyone pays the cartel in some way, shape, or form. And say the mom says, I don't have $5,000 a head. I have $5,000 for 4 of us. And they say, well, okay, you and 2 of your kids go across. We'll keep Johnny over here and we'll send him over there when we're done
Oh,
with a
wow.
note card or with a Sharpie on his shirt or whatever it might be. This kid can be recycled, whatever it might be, cross over with a single adult man. He might be raped, exploited in Mexico. His organs might even be harvested, and he might not
Oh,
ever
wow.
make it to his mom. And that is the reality that we're seeing. These kids literally show up with a note card. And I've literally been there when a little girl was recovered, and we called the mom, and the mom said, oh, I told him to give him to that lady, all nonchalant. And her picture on her WhatsApp profile was her in a club dress. And then as soon as I called her and I asked her about her child, she changed her profile picture to her holding a baby.
Oh,
And
wow.
so this is the whole scheme to these individuals. They don't care. They don't treat their children the same way. When I was walking with the caravan, I thought, oh my gosh, these kids don't have shoes on. They're walking around in diapers. They must be being trafficked. They must be being treated poorly. No, that is unfortunately how they're treated in a lot of these homes and households. And then, yeah, they're left behind as payment. And so that is what we have seen. And now you have 320,000 kids in the United States that either don't have a parent or don't have a sponsor, or were one of the 100 kids placed at one single home in Texas, right? So that's what we have seen. And they don't have an adequate way to track these kids at all, PAGs. And so that has been why I got involved in the border crisis in the first place. And unfortunately, our voices have never been loud enough to shut that kind of door on those kids so that they, aren't being exploited like they are. The New York Times did a whole article about how hundreds of these unaccompanied children were working in factories that supply things to Frito-Lay and things like that, not little makeshift rinky-dink spots. Big dogs like Frito-Lay factories are employing these unaccompanied children, and no one in America seemed to even register that was happening. And so the crisis quite literally perpetuated a cycle of exploiting these children. What's really weird, Pax, is the DOJ sued Southwest Key Programs, which was the biggest government contractor housing these unaccompanied children, even though we had 3 vacant government facilities in warm status that we were paying for as taxpayers. We were farming them out to 296 facilities. DOJ comes in, files a lawsuit against Southwest Key Program, again, the biggest government contractor, for child sexual assault and exploitation and abuse in their shelters. Nothing in that lawsuit prevented them from new contracts or from continuing to house children. However, HHS came in and said, we're going to end the contracts. They did this recently. So Pam Bondi and the DOJ pulled that lawsuit in March. Unsure why. Interesting.
So odd. It is it's Allie Bradley down at the border, Allie Bradley TV. Go follow her everywhere. So with them coming across the border, they could have lied about who they were. We have no idea how to track them. I don't think we're getting fingerprints on anybody who comes in. We're certainly not taking DNA. So what is the current DHS under Trump and under Noem doing to try to find what the DHS under Mayorkas and Biden screwed up?
So they have reinstituted that mandatory DNA testing. It was really interesting because they got rid of that under Biden, and then I reported about it, and they said, you're wrong, you're lying. And I said, no, I'm not. Here's the policy. And they said, well, they still do it, but the parent or guardian has to give consent. And I said, you see the problem there, that a fraudulent family has to give you consent to prove they're fraudulent. So they have reinstituted the DNA testing. Now, when you said we don't know who they are, you're exactly right. If a 20-year-old comes over, but he looks 15, he's going to say he's 15. Unless they run dental checks, he's 15. So that is also a reality. That has not changed under Trump. I don't know how they can mitigate that better outside
Allie,
of
are unaccompanied migrants,
recognition.
are unaccompanied children still coming now, or did the new policies dissuade this whole activity?
Yeah, it's crashed completely. I mean, we're seeing a minuscule amount of anyone crossing. And with that, the unaccompanied children has also plummeted. So we're not seeing that on a level. We aren't seeing it in the Rio Grande Valley. We're not seeing it to a degree that we were in any way, shape, or form, where, we were seeing 10,000 children in custody. That's not happening right now. We're seeing a few thousand, obviously, because they haven't placed them or whatever that might be, but it has completely shifted with the crossings of adults. The perpetuating door for the children has also closed, which I think all of us would agree is a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. Allie Bradley TV, go follow her everywhere. Make sure that you do. You're dumb if you don't. Hello. She's down there at the Southwest border as that's her station. She's an incredible reporter. I think the best in the business who does it. Have you seen them turn anybody around? Quite literally, Tom Homan has said, I've talked to other officials, top officials at the DHS. We had one on last week. I talked to Kristi Noem 3 weeks ago. Are they literally turning people around? They are allowed, if they see them cross the border illegally, our government is allowed to turn them around and say, go back, or put them on a bus and take them back. Are you seeing any of that? Are they turning them around? Or are they still bringing them in, processing them, and then getting them ready for deportation? How's it working now?
They are turning them around pretty quickly. It depends on their nationality, right? If they're from the Northern Triangle, pretty easy to turn right back around. Mexico, you're going to be able to walk them back across the bridge. I don't see any of that because we're not seeing anyone cross. You're seeing 19 to 50 people cross across an entire sector over 24 hours. So I'm not seeing people right now. We're not seeing individuals crossing. That's not what we're seeing. Now, I will say this. ICE has ramped up their repatriation flights in Mexico because they aren't getting as many bodies crossing that they can return. So they're returning more to Mexico instead of the Northern Triangle, which I think is interesting. They want those numbers, right? The statistic showing, hey, we're removing people. But they aren't getting, they have to go find them, and it takes time. They used to get hundreds of people walking across and saying I self-surrender, and then they could pick them up if they didn't qualify for asylum and remove them.
Right.
Now they quite literally have to go find them in the interior because, as you know, and as we've reported for 4 years, no one stays at the border. Crisis
What is
isn't
that? What
staying
is
at the
that vehicle
border.
behind you right now? There's a van, a white van behind you.
That's a van. So that one, what time is it, Trev? We have a live shot here coming up. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
This is Fluid Live Shot News.
Okay.
So that's a van.
We have shot in 4 minutes.
Okay, that's a van that's driven by the, looks like Texas National Guard. It could be Department of Defense as well.
Okay.
But generally, the unmarked vans like that are going to be some kind of military supplement, a force multiplier for Border Patrol. So
Give me one
okay,
more minute.
I gotta get jumping on
I know
this
you gotta
one.
go. Give me 60 more seconds. Are you
Okay.
seeing people use the CBP home app? Are they going back self-deporting?
So DHS is saying that thousands of people have used that app so far. Again, I don't see individuals right now that are A, crossing, or B, within the interior that are
Okay.
using the CBP home app, because the problem didn't stay in Del Rio. So there aren't people walking around in Del Rio going, oh, I need to self-deport. There's one dude that just got popped the other day for assault that had a history of deportations, right? So random here and there, you're going to see those individuals. But DHS says thousands of people are using it. I haven't seen it with my own eyes. I
Right.
only like to report what I know. DHS says that. People are saying, prove it. I would also like to see that. And I would like to know how many individuals of those thousands Americans are paying for those flights, and how many got the $1,000 stipend to make it back home. I would like
Love
to know
having
that.
you on. Go do TV. It's Allie Bradley TV. Go and follow her right now. Watch her on NewsNation. Allie, thanks a million. There's a lot going on with the border. In fact, I've said this before, and I mean it. I think that Marco Rubio has really shown up, man. I just think that he's been way above and beyond what I thought he'd be as Secretary of State. Now, I didn't have any bad feelings about Marco Rubio. Didn't have any ill will towards Marco Rubio, but I knew him as the guy who ran for president in 2016. I knew him as the guy who's been the senator from Florida for a long time, and he's always got a good take on things. But I didn't see him being this guy, and this has been very, very impressive. Rubio isn't taking any garbage when it comes to what's happening on the border. Rubio is not playing games when it comes to people who are on student visas who are visitors here, ginning up trouble on college campuses. He's not taking any garbage from people that are the representatives of the Palestinian/Hamas supporters of Columbia or Harvard or whatever. And I think that's the way to go. And he hasn't backed down. You've got all these idiots that want to come after him and act like he's doing something wrong. Well, he's not. He's doing something that's very, very good. The State Department actually is looking out for the United States of America and is relating with foreign leaders to make sure they understand we're not playing this game anymore. This is a new America. To that end, let me give you this. State Department says it will aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students. Good. Marco Rubio said revocations will include students with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. From Alexander Cook or Koch, not sure, over at Fox News Digital. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced Wednesday, some would call that today, the U.S. will begin aggressively revoking visas of Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. Quote, under President Donald Trump's leadership, the U.S. State Department will work with the Department of Homeland Security to aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields, Rubio wrote in a statement. Let me just jump in here. Why were they ever let into this country? Why do they ever get a student visa if we know about connections to the Chinese Communist Party? I don't get that. Back to the story. The State Department would also revise citizen or visa criteria, that is, to enhance scrutiny of all future visa applications for the People's Republic of China and from Hong Kong. In March, House Republicans introduced the Stop Chinese Communist Prying, the SCCP, by vindicating intellectual safeguards in Academia Act. Okay. This is called Stop CCP Visas Act. You know what I mean? So I figured they were spelling something.
Right.
All right, let me do that again. Because now that I know what it means, here it is again. House Republicans introduced the Stop Chinese Communist Prying by Vindicating Intellectual Safeguards in Academia Act, also known as the Stop CCP Visas Act. In an interview with Fox Business on May 12, Florida Senator Ashley Moody criticized providing Chinese visas to Chinese nationals. Let's get Ashley Moody on the show.
Okay.
We know that she loves coming on. Let's get her on. We haven't had her since she's been a senator. Quote, how can we keep offering 300,000 students or student visas to Chinese nationals every year when we know they are legally required to gather intelligence for the CCP? The answer is simple. We can't. Moody wrote in a post on X, at Stanford Review's report on CCP espionage on campus should shock everyone and verify what I've been saying. We needed to pass the Stop CCP Visas Act to protect our national security. This seems to be a no-brainer. I watched Judge Judy, best judge ever on the television, although I do like Judge Milian as well from the People's Court. But Judge Judy has always said, well, that's an easy. You know what I mean? That's an easy. Is that difficult? We would like to stop the Chinese spying, and we know that people coming here on student visas are required, like by law in China, to collect data and evidence and send it back. That's an easy. You don't get to come here. Not really sure I understand why they were ever allowed to come here. And then add to that, of course, the insult to injury of the spy balloon that flew across the country. That's a weather balloon. It's just off track a little bit. Yeah. Is China close to the United States?
No, not even a little bit close.
I'm going to say far away on that one. Yeah.
Far.
I'm going to say far. It went off course a little bit. Went through Alaska, ours. Went down through Canada. They ignored it. Went through like Washington State, across the contiguous United States, and then off the coast of the Carolinas, we went, let's shoot it down now. Because, of course, in real time, it probably couldn't collect data and send it back via satellite. That'd be weird. Which is exactly what we know it did. And we allowed it. Or how about the Chinese nationals that come across the southern border, get into the United States, and somehow, with Google Map available, Google Maps or Apple Maps, whatever maps you want to use, with those available, they somehow got lost and ended up at a military installation several times. Sam, that's kind of weird.
So strange.
Paul, that ever happened to you? The Google Maps take you to an installation by accident?
Can't say that's happened.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Listen, I've messed up putting in the Google Map stuff, but I've never had it lead me right to the Army base. It just doesn't happen. Somehow the Chinese nationals found their way to the base. Sorry. Our bad. Come on, man. It's probably coincidental that people from China are buying up land around military installations. There's nothing to see here. Stop. And then there's this. MS-13 gang member among 40 arrested by ICE in Martha's Vineyard. What? Martha's Vineyard let 40 people back on? They got rid of the 50 that were there in like 48 hours. Okay, here's the story from NewsNation. 40 people arrested by ICE in Martha's Vineyard. Child sex offender, MS-13 gang member. Among the arrests, U.S. Coast Guard transported people from the islands. Ultra-liberal Martha's Vineyard, I don't know. I haven't seen them complain today. Any complaints from Martha's Vineyard?
Not that I've seen.
I haven't seen any either. That's weird. I bet they would be for this operation. Although they've got a sign there that they're open to anybody, legal or not. Depending on status, doesn't matter. MS-13 gang member was one of 40 people arrested after U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and other federal law enforcement conducted an operation in Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, a report said. Many of the people had previous criminal records, including the said gang member. At least one child sex offender was also apprehended. Operations like this highlights the strong alliances that ICE shares with our fellow law enforcement partners, said Patricia H. Hyde, ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations Boston Acting Field Office Director. That's a long title. The U.S. Coast Guard safely transported those arrested from Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard using small boats and a cutter to support ICE operations around the islands. That's weird because Michelle Wu, last time I checked in Boston, doesn't want to help ICE. In fact, I'm not going to say she's hindering because that would be against the law, but she's certainly doing everything she can to make sure she doesn't assist them getting bad guys. But suddenly, somehow, the uber rich on Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket, they were able to get help from ICE and also help ICE. Hey, use our boats. Enjoy. Kind of interesting when it's in your backyard. Now you kind of understand better why people like Governor Greg Abbott said, yeah, let's send them to those states and those cities, those municipalities that all said, we're okay with people being here illegally. We're okay with that. Very interesting. And then what are people doing, migrants who are in Mexico right now? Let's go to this one. 7 out of 10 staying put in Mexico OIM director says ongoing efforts focus on getting children enrolled in schools, helping adults find jobs in Mexico. Well, that seems to make sense. Out of El Paso from NewsNation, 7 out of 10 who found the U.S. border closed to asylum after January 20th did not return to their countries of origin, but instead chose to remain in Mexico. Those, including many families with young children, are now looking for stable employment for themselves and for a Mexican school that will take their children. That's according to the director of the International Organization for in Juarez, Mexico. Quote, we're seeing great interest from people in looking for a lawful stay and integrating to Mexico. A great number of people are looking for an education for their children or having a formal job in Mexico, said Ileana Martel, head of the IOM office in Juarez. Martel did not say how many remained in the city. Several church-run shelter operators say most of their guests have left, and officials with the Center for Assistance in Juarez last week told local news media they're primarily serving from the. You know what I mean? What the hell is going on?
Are you okay there?
They keep on doing
really
it.
Progressively.
They keep
more
on
aggressive.
writing it, though. They keep writing it.
Yeah. He's saying migrant, by the way.
What? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Back to the story. But a considerable number of citizens from Latin America and Caribbean countries remain in Mexico, according to IOM. Quote, 72% of interviewed by us in Mexico say they have no interest in returning to their countries of origin but want to stay in Mexico, Martel said. The main obstacles for a lawful long-term stay in Mexico are money. Need stable employment, and the lack of documents needed to get work permit or enroll their children in school. That's why the United Nations Partner Agency is sponsoring consular services fairs throughout Mexico, including one in Juarez this past weekend. IOM secured space in a Juarez PRONAF area building, so staff from the consulates of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, as well as representatives from the embassies of Brazil and Haiti, could talk to their citizens. Many filled out forms to get new passport and national identity card for losing the originals during the long trip to the U.S. border or having them stolen by criminals. You know, they learned they didn't write the word migrant again. Listen, that's what they're getting. Every time I see that word, that's what I'm saying. Because they're using it incorrectly. They are not migrants, they're immigrants. And if they're doing it illegally, they're illegal immigrants. Some would say illegal aliens, according to our government. But that's what's going on. Isn't that what we wanted? You're in Mexico that I thought was a free country, that I thought was a stable country, that I thought was a country that is a so-called democracy. You're supposed to stop at the first safe place. Mexico would be the first safe place. And if you're coming from the Northern Triangle specifically, you speak Spanish already, you could just stay there. They already speak the language. Instead of coming here, trying to learn a new language and getting a bunch of free stuff and being flown around the country free. No, go to work in Mexico. Have your kids go to school in Mexico. Build yourself a new life. And if you still want to come here, apply legally and then end up coming here. Then you can migrate here. In the meantime, Scott is in Boston. Scott, what do you think?
So, Joe, let's tie everything together here. You talked about the Chinese immigration. You talked about Harvard and all the corruption going on.
Yes.
Fauci connected with Cambridge. And there were 2 scientists from China arrested at Logan Airport from Harvard with vials in their suitcase, vials of a substance, a liquid vial. Let's connect all the dots together. Let's connect everything, Joe. What is going on here with Harvard, the Kremlin of the Charles River? Come on now. Please work with me here.
You call it the Kremlin of the Charles River? I didn't know that. I did not know that. Now, many people would suggest our friend Mike Benz, who is an expert on the blob, an expert on all these alphabet agencies, he puts out there that he thinks that Harvard was created by the CIA, and he thinks that it's a front for everything that the deep state's doing.
I absolutely agree with that. The corruption that's involved with Harvard is unbelievable, funded by taxpayer dollar now. Trump shut it off. Good for him. Connect back to 2019, right before COVID. 2 Chinese scientists studying at Harvard arrested at Logan Airport with vials, and it all gets swept under the rug. We never heard the follow-up from that.
That's going to do it for this episode of Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. Really glad that you took this one in. We wanted to break down what's happening on the border, show you literal live shots as Ali walked around and showed you the fence, the wall, the Obama this, the George W. Bush that, what Trump is trying to do the other, and the fact that the wall is not really the border. The border's right in the middle of the Rio Grande River. You're not going to build a wall in the middle of the river. You can put buoys and other, barricades in there. But that wall is a good half a mile, she says, in some areas, a full mile away from the actual border. And you'll notice there was nobody coming across while she was speaking. We're going to keep on bringing you incredible interviews. Hopefully you've checked out the entire playlist. If you haven't subscribed to it yet, here on YouTube, make sure you sub to the playlist. It's called Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. Want you to do that. It's also on other platforms. If you want just audio, which a lot of people do, you go to Spotify, Megaphone, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, Salem. Go and get it, download it, binge listen to it if you need to. But I really appreciate those of you who are helping us to build our following here on YouTube. The long term, or the long form, I should say, on YouTube is not easy to build. There's a special formula or something. We're starting to break through. A couple of our interviews with Laura Logan, the other one with Laura Trump and Ed Martin, those have gotten through pretty well. The other one's not as much. So do me a favor. Take a second. It's free. Click on follow or subscribe here on YouTube, or follow or subscribe over on Rumble or wherever you get your audio podcasts as well. Make sure you follow every episode. We're going to bring you 3 quality interviews every single week in long form. Hope you like it. Thanks again for watching Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. We'll have another one for you very soon.